Hello, just thought I'd do a quick video and just a break from the series that I've been doing, but it will be related because they always are, and especially the theme of weights and measures. So time, temperature, pressure, or weight itself, the ruler, but the 360-degree compass, and time and the compass here I think are a nice connection because of the solar calendar of 365, well actually 365.242 days, but how that itself is a calendar, this measure of time. Now, an interesting thing, I don't like to get in it because it's still questionable. So what we have, get an idea here of at least the official timeline of history. And the Old Kingdom is a really strange one because um, Egypt just sort of gets lumped together, but really we're looking, at least on the official timeline, a 3,000 year period here. So from the Nama Palette, which is the official beginnings of Egyptian history, at least that they where the King Nama or Mina unified the kingdoms, and so we have the two crowns, and then we see Upper and Lower Egypt crowns, and then the crown there, which is the unification. Now, the unification would firstly imply that there was already two existing civilizations. Officially, civilization begins around the year 3100 BC. Yet, was not North and South Kingdom, were they not a civilization at that time? That's something else. Now, at least by the official timeline, and I like to, well, so between, shortly after, so roughly, well, basically a few centuries from 2700 to 2500, all of the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built in 2 centuries. Now, the Great Pyramid of Egypt is still ranks as one of the most amazing, largest, heaviest, biggest structures going around. And it wasn't until the cathedrals that the height was surpassed, and then really until the beginning of the skyscrapers was the height of the pyramid surpassed. Now, the pyramid is solid, so it's not just about the height, it's also what skyscrapers and cathedrals are narrow and tall, and they're empty on the inside. Now, that in itself must be put in perspective, because to build a large empty building is a lot harder than to clump things on top of one another. However, the pyramid is not just a primitive collection of stones on top of one another. It has these internal structures which required great construction skills to support the weight above them. Very, very advanced. And so the Egyptians officially began with no history, no libraries, no experience to draw upon. And then within a couple of centuries, not only did they build one, but a whole series of great pyramids, huge pyramids again that are so precise and just huge and marvelous structures. And they were built, so whether it's the cathedrals or skyscrapers, we had a long history of build up towards the skill needed to make those. It was not, it evolved, yet the official history has that the pyramids sort of just popped up out of nowhere, which is a bit like saying, Henry Ford designed a Mustang, 65 Mustang, and then he designed the Model T, because what we find is in later periods of Egypt there's a devolution. The temples that never rival the size or the scale or even the, well, maybe the accuracy, yes, but they're just it's a completely different construction form as well. So it's just, interesting that officially the Egyptians began with a blank slate, no libraries, no real experience to draw upon, and then within a couple of steps that they were not only sprinting, they were doing high jump, Olympic skill, and then went back to crawling, and that's so, but now, but I know that the dating is a controversial one, but still, it's at least the official story. It's it goes against all existing models of an evolution of technology, rather than we didn't begin with a space shuttle and then go back to a bicycle. It evolved, and yet for some reason it's sort of pretty much acceptable to say that this was the case. But what I really want to get into is so a lot of like Combo Ombo, Com Ombo, and Denda, and a lot of these other temples that we see is Egyptian. We can, and most people would assume that they're on the same time period and era from the Great Pyramids or some of these older ones. No, Komombo, Denda, Several of these other magnificent temples were actually from the Ptolemaic period, which is when the Greeks were the ruling people in Egypt. So now I bring up Ombo because that relates to the calendar there, which has 3 seasons so there were 3 seasons in Egypt which are related to the cycle of the Nile, the flooding and inundation. But they had a 12 months of 30 days, so a 360-day calendar, which is a crosses time and cultures, plus 5 days on top of that. Now, and that period, so this is again 180 BC to 1370. So this period, the Ptolemaic period, is where a great deal of the temples we think of as ancient Egyptian were actually Greek and Roman constructions, such as Denda. And but we go back to this period again, official history, where we have the Sumerians around about 3000 BC. They had complicated maths, writing, geometry, but also this base 60 number system, which connects, of course, to now the origins of the 360-degree compass is hotly debated. But that same numeration system from the Sumerians as parts of a 12-inch, 60 minutes per hour, 60 seconds per minute, the 360-degree compass. Each degree is broken up into 60 minutes, each minute into 60 seconds. And this again has been passed through. Even the 12 inches per foot comes from this system, because it's just we can divide it into thirds and quarters, and so to do, especially with weights and measures, it connects. But so we have this origin, and we know that these numeration systems, this geometry, was around at the same time as the ancient Egyptians, who were able to build great pyramids, but for some reason they couldn't work out pi, or they couldn't work out all these other the Pythagorean theorem, which Sumerians were doing as well. But the calendar is the important feature, and so the Romans adopted, because after the Ptolemaic period, Caesar, Mark Antony, and Cleopatra, the Romans took over, and their calendar was, they already had a reasonably good calendar, but then their calendar became better because they adopted the Egyptian calendar of 365 days, but they also had a 360-day period plus 5, and that was again considered a time when it was like a holiday sort of thing, when new ventures were not, it was a bad luck to begin new things. Very similar to holidays or the Sabbath, you don't sort of do work at that time. And well, that brings us back to the Mayans, and so the Great Pyramid on the equinox, this is a famous photo where on the equinox the Great Pyramid is 8-sided, and we see the shadow splitting that. Now I'm still very curious about this, because this photo, it's an old photo and it was taken at just the right time. However, I haven't really been able to find any video or photo of it happening in this era, which is curious. Now, what's happened, I don't know. But again, if someone post a link, if you can, because I thought everyone would be sitting there on the equinox trying to get this photo, but spring equinox, but it's only the old photo seems to appear. But in the Mayan, so the pyramid of Kukulcan, we see on the equinox this shadow serpent appears, and that's only on that time. Now that goes to the Mayan because the Mayan calendar had 365 they understood even the fraction of a day. They were absolute genius in maths and astronomy, amongst many other things. But what's curious about this pyramid is also so there are 4 stairways, one on either side, and each one has 91 steps. 91 times 4 is 364. Plus we have a final step onto the temple platform at the top, which gives you 365 days in total. And the Mayan year was 360 days, plus a 5-day period of rebirth, which is just like the ancient one from the Mediterranean, just call it Egyptian, and so they have, and this seems to follow through. Now, given their skill, they could have, just like our calendar, they could have, had a 30-day month or added a little bit of a fraction. They understood that the synodic month, the full moons, for instance, the moon cycle, is actually 29.5 days, and they could have rearranged their calendar in all sorts of patterns to achieve that. Yet they all seem to be falling on this 360 plus a 5-day period, which is interesting to the 360 degrees and where were the actual origins of it. So, for instance, even in the Kaaba in Saudi Arabia, before the Islamic period, there were 360 statues around the outside. So it really does sort of, now even you can find similar events because the ancient Indians have great skill as well in their maths and their astronomy too. So not to leave them out. But we have that equinox thing. But there's another interesting pyramid, the pyramid of niches. So there are all these little niches around the outside. This is in El Tajin in Mexico. But what does it have? It has 365 niches. And, well, what's really cool about this, I think, is because it's 66 feet high. Now, in some previous videos, I'll drop some links in the description, how the same sets of measures which you can find in the Mediterranean and also the calendars, for instance, and these similarities, the temple measures, 66 feet or 33, half of that, it pops up so often. It is a temple standard. It's got to be, it's pretty much without doubt because it's so often again across the Mediterranean and in the New World. And what is all that? So 108 feet, 98 feet, and 33 feet, or half of that is 66 is twice of that. Well, what is this pyramid? That's 98 feet. This was built on an older pyramid which was 108 feet wide and 33 feet high on the available measurements. So that one has to go with a little bit of an asterisk. But given that it appears there are other pyramids in the Mayan world that are 108 feet and as well as this 33 and 98 feet scale, the same scales, which connects nicely because the Indus or the Sumerian foot, which 1.1 of modern English feet, which modern English foot is not modern, but we find that as a standard in Harappa and in Mohenjo-Daro, and find it so often appearing in Egypt. We also get 98 feet appearing in Egypt. I'll drop links to some other descriptions, but go to Abu Simbel, the facade. Most say it's 108 feet. Now, it's again a little bit of an asterisk there, but the statues themselves 66 and 33 feet. So just like in El Tajin and the Pyramid of the Niches, and the same things really. Just the measurable is what, and 108 feet. The Great Bath in Mohenjo-Daro. Stonehenge, so many other stone circles in England as well, and 33 feet blue Stonehenge. Also in the Karnak in France, we find the same info, and even the Pythagorean triangles, the same numbers and these same measurement scales. And so just like measuring time, the calendar year, and this also converts to, again, just always, okay. That's I should clarify that. So yep. But anyway, what do we have? The 7-11 proportions of the Great Pyramid. Now I've got to say this is that's not exactly 1.618. I should have not included those. But what we have is a Fibonacci sequence. That's something else which relates to the pyramid proportions. But yeah, calendars, weights and measure systems, and because you cannot say that these, it's illegal essentially in official circles to say that there are any sort of connections pre-Columbian. Yet just like the presence of the tobacco beetle, cocaine or coca, and tobacco in Egyptian mummies as well, which is very contentious, and again just sort of spoils the plot that there were these connections, and that's just measurable, and that's one of the things that's just sad. Anyway, just a movement away, I just want to, just clearing out folders, and I thought I'd include this one because it relates to a recent upload. But anyway, the year and the measures and this, continue. Information, weights and measures, Hermeticism, both God of weights and measures. Cheers.